I'd asked John and told to do this, and that told Jane Ann I might have to. But in any case, by popular demand, or by at least by a strong response, positive response to Jane Ann's talking about bipolar disorder a few weeks ago, she's agreed to come back and to expand on this a bit more. So thank you so much for doing that, Jane Ann. And I hope I get to watch and listen. If my battery's charged up enough on my cell phone. But anyway, welcome and thank you for doing this.
Thanks, Bill. I'm happy to do this. It gives me actually joy to share this with everyone and to feel like I'm making a difference in people understanding more about mental health problems and reducing the stigma of it. Research has pretty much shown that, well, it has shown that getting to know somebody who has a mental illness is the best thing a person can do in terms of the illness being less stigmatized. And, you know, that goes for any kind of bigotry, racism, homophobia. When you get to know somebody that you think of as other, then you begin to think of them as us. And
Sorry.
50% of we who live in the United States are going to have a mental health disorder at some point in our lives. 25% of us are going to get depressed. Bipolar disorder only occurs in 2.5%. So it's very small. I said on the last 5 weeks ago that I think we all pretty feel comfortable saying I have ADHD or I have depression. But I can tell you with putting this together, what I realized is that I feel more comfortable saying I had depression. When I am depressed, I feel vulnerable to say that I'm depressed right now because of that. I don't know, that fear that I'm going to be judged, or my fear that it's my fear that I'm just a lazy, inadequate person and somebody who has depression. Now, I shared before information about 2 different manic episodes I had. And in preparing, I've had 4 total. And in preparing this, I found that I'm comfortable to read about the second one. I'm not comfortable to share much about the last one, which was in 2018. But it has deep meaning for me. And I guess I'm a little scared that maybe somebody would think, oh, Jane Ann's bonkers, you know, she really believes in God. You know, like she thinks God's talking to her. We need to send her to a different church. She doesn't fit in with us, you know. But you know, it's only because I have the love and support of Covenant Church that I feel, I mean, this is the first time where I've said I have this illness to people. I mean, I've told individual people, but I've never gone to the point of doing something that's more public, you would say. So last time I talked about that there are 5 mood disorders as defined in the DSM-5.
I got in.
All right, Bill. Yeah, so I was saying that in putting this together, I realized that I've had 4 episodes. The first 3 were in the late 90s. And then I didn't have one for 20 years. And then I had it, and my doctor and I thought we would just lower my medicine. I was doing really well. Hadn't been really hypomanic or manic for 20 years, but we lowered my medicine. I lowered it a little bit more on my own. And 10 days later, I got manic. And so that was February of 2018. And like I was saying, I feel more vulnerable sharing something that just happened. But it's very meaningful to me. And I'll share a little bit about it at the very end. Okay. So I'm just going to go to prepared remarks. I've never thought having bipolar disorder was a personal failing, but I've hidden it. I had seen years of being depressed as a personal failure. I was basically depressed most of the time between the age of 23 and 53. And being diagnosed with bipolar disorder gave me a sense of legitimacy that my chronic depression was not like a personality disorder. And I also, I always felt like this was a word I learned from my dad, that I was just such a loser. And so getting the bipolar disorder diagnosis was really a positive thing for me, because I thought of it more as like, okay, this is a bona fide physical, everybody knows this is biological, even my peers know that. Excuse me. Now, my motive for writing has been something I've thought about. I took a 10-day writer's retreat course back a year ago, and he asked us to think about what our motive was for writing. And mine, I felt like, was to tell people about bipolar disorder, to reduce the stigma of having it, to let people know there's hope. But I recently realized, I think the biggest underlying motive was that I wanted to show the world what a horrible mother I had. And I don't feel that way anymore. It hit me a couple months ago. I don't feel like that anymore. That's not. And it's been a struggle, because when I said what she did to me and my brother and physically abusing us, she sounds like a demon. And she too has her own history of abuse, and was a victim just like me. And unfortunately, that's the way it usually happens. You see child abuse being passed from one generation to the next. And I think, she thought she was doing the right thing, to make me and my brother a good little boy and a good little girl, and grow up and be good people. She loved me. She died 4 years ago, and at the funeral the night before, one of her friends three of her friends came to me and said, your mom was just the nicest person in the world. And of course, I haven't told people about myself being abused in my hometown, except for close friends, and then my family knows. Well, no, my family says they don't. My brother has no memories of it. I was flooded with memories of it. But one friend came to me and said, one of my mom's close friends said, your mom was the nicest person I've ever met. And I've never heard anybody say one bad thing about her. So this was part of the confusion of what happened to me, because it was, I mean, we had this image of being this happy family and very high functioning, and yet we weren't. So what I want to say, and next one is just, and to say this too, that my shift in thinking over the last couple of years has been not so much what's my diagnosis, but what happened to me. And I'm trying to move there with my patients. It's a shift, because in psychiatry, we're used to saying, okay, this is what's wrong. First, we got to figure out what's wrong with you, then we'll know what to do. I am trying to change that to, first, I got to figure out what happened to you. And then I'll know what to do. Which destigmatizes a lot when you say what happened to you rather than what's wrong with you. So I want to just give you some statistics about our brain and its functioning. It's really crazy to think that anybody knows what exactly causes any mental health disorder, how it happens. The level, at this point, the level though of sophistication of learning, that what does trauma, I mean, they're traumatizing mice and looking at levels of neurotransmitters, levels of different proteins, turning off and on genes that then express the disorder. So in the end, it's the same deal, that probably for the major disorders, schizophrenia, bipolar, major depression, their panic disorder, you're born with a genetic tendency, and given enough or the right kind of stress, the illness comes out. The genes get turned on, the illness comes out. Okay, and I hope I live a really long time, because I want to know what the heck is going on. It's a true mystery, and it really causes a conundrum in psychiatric care, because I'm expected as a psychiatrist to practice and provide care that meets the local standard of care. And the local standard of care calls for aggressive medication management. And I do that, and I'm good at that. But I'm adding to that stigmatization by saying, what's your problem? And I'm just, in my mind, I have to come to a place as a psychiatrist, what can I do that's going to best serve my patients? It's going to be the most therapeutic. So let me go to, I'm a little bit rattled with the time and looking at it, but it's okay. So I've had 4 episodes. November 92, I was stressed out by a course I attended in Chicago. I thought people could tell how smart I was by how my coat swung in the airport. 96, I thought I was an angel. My dad was having his prostate out at Methodist Hospital. And this was 4 days after the most loving person in my life died, and I was totally unprepared for her to die. And I didn't sleep for about 4 days. So then when my dad had his surgery at Methodist, I was walking around with one of my dolls from when I was a little girl that my niece had given me, saying that my dad might need those dolls, the favorite dolls, when he was having his surgery. So everything got all mixed up in my head, and I was walking around Methodist Hospital carrying a doll, a baby doll, wrapped up in a blanket, and I wound up in this, it must have been a neurology intermediate care unit. There were a lot of men in there. They were in just regular beds. They were asleep. And I would go into their rooms and touch their feet and believe that I had healed them. So I went from place to place and did that. Now, I didn't get caught by anyone. But I also thought that President Clinton was going to announce that there was world peace. And I called all my friends and I said, meet me in the lobby at Methodist Hospital. One of them came, she realized what was happening. She took me to see my psychiatrist. He sent me to the hospital at Spring Shadows Glen. I was there for 10 days. I was so manic. I didn't sleep for 4 days. I finally, one night, I was cheeking my meds, so I wasn't taking the meds they were giving me. Part of me thought that I was part of a grand experiment, and that the American Psychiatric Association was trying to figure out whether my doctor was a good doctor or not. I mean, it was just this vast, just delusions, just this vast belief system. And when I realized that I was ill and I started taking my medicine, I got better and was out of the hospital within a few days. Now, the commonalities of these were that the time of year they occurred in, there was always a stressor, always racing thoughts, grandiosity, feeling like God wanted me to do this. God wanted me to take part in the experiment. God wanted me in 2018 to figure out something. I don't know what it was, but I had this idea, like I was going to write a movie and it was going to come out before the 2020 election and Trump wouldn't win. And the thing about, we have our dreams and we have our goals, but when you're manic, your goals, you think you can, or at least me, that I can accomplish them in like record time. Like I could sit down and write a script and it would be understood and it would be done. It would change the world. So the grandiosity is common with mania. Paranoia is very common with mania. Okay, so things that have happened to me as a result of having it there are multiple negatives. Weight gain affected my thyroid. Lithium affected my thyroid, which was easily fixed. It caused kidney damage, which I got off the lithium. My kidneys got back to normal. I had pre-diabetes for a while. I had borderline hypertension. With each episode, I was unable to work for 2 or 3 weeks afterwards because I couldn't concentrate. So I had lost income. In 1998, I got so depressed that for 8 months I couldn't work. I impulsively, after the 3rd episode, quit the best job I'd ever had. I was a psychiatrist at the U of H, Student Health Center. I've had to labor through the insulting question on the Texas Medical Board's yearly registration. You know, do you have a mental disorder that could affect your functioning as a psychiatrist? Well, I had to say yes, because, you know, I felt like I had to be honest, and I'd had that time where I couldn't work for 8 months. So I would get a letter every year. Thank you, Dr. Leaves, for your service to the people of the state of Texas, but we need more information about your mental health problem. Now, most states abandoned that question, but of course, Texas didn't do it until last year. I've had to pay for expensive psychotherapy, which has largely been out of my pocket for the last 5 to 6 years. And the good news is that I just switched over to this new medicine called Vraylar. The switch has not been completed, and it's been bumpy. It's been 5 weeks since I last talked about bipolar disorder. And since then, it's bordering on some hypomania normal, and it's just for like a few minutes or a couple of hours. But my psychiatrist and I, we've got that under control. I think. Okay, so I want to read just a bit from I was going to write a book, but then I decided I'm just going to read chapters that I've written now, because I don't know the chance of me being alive or being able to write my book. People with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia have a lifespan that's about 10 years less than the average lifespan. So in some ways, I feel like I need to write as fast as I can and get it out and share it, because what if I die not at 82, but at 72? But one good thing is that, like, maybe I wouldn't run out of money at the end. You know, I'd died 10 years earlier than I planned for. So the title of the book would be Emerging from Mental Hellness While There's Still Time. So mental hellness, HELLNESS, instead of illness. Most babies come from heaven. I came from hell. What did I do in my past lives? In Greater Tuna, the question is asked. I don't know what I did. It's asked as a question, but I see it as a statement for me. I don't know what I did to deserve the life I lead. Now, let me see, time, I want to be sure I get time for discussion. My mom, I got spanked. Well, let me say this. Let me just read this just a bit. I started psychotherapy at 23 years old when I was a second-year medical student at UT Houston here. I was diagnosed with dysthymia, which is a low-grade pervasive depression, chronic depression. When I was a third-year medical student, I was on a child psychiatry unit, and I took care of 3 little boys that were all depressed. The only thing they had in common was that they'd all been emotionally and physically abused. So being the good medical student that I was, I went to the library, I checked out some books about child abuse, I took them home and I started reading. So the first night the first book I opened was really dry, boring, tons of statistics. So I opened another one, and there in black and white were the facts about child abuse and its aftermath. Before that moment, I thought all kids got spanked like I was, 3 or 4 days of the week, sometimes twice a day, often with our pants down and with a belt every 2 weeks or so. I reeled backwards away from the book as if being further away from it would somehow undo what I'd just read. I was in shock, realizing the gravity of what had happened to me and my brother. So that I was like, oh, that's probably why I'm depressed. You know, like, how does a kid feel about themselves when they're treated like that? And who wouldn't get depressed from that? And because we had the perfect looking family, you know, I just kept thinking, it's me, it's not them. I'm the one that's not good enough. I'm the one that doesn't fit in. But who wouldn't be depressed? 90 to 95% of parents who abuse their children are not sociopaths. They're ignorant about normal child development and think they're doing the right thing. I never had the courage to confront my mom about it. I told my dad about it when I was hypomanic after the first time I got sick. He talked to her for 5 minutes on the phone. He put the phone down. He went and talked to her for 5 minutes. He came back and he said, "Your mom said this didn't happen." And I never again had the courage to confront her. I didn't talk about it with my dad until the day we put my mom in a nursing home when she had Alzheimer's. And he said, "I'm really sorry that happened. I had no idea." The most sense that I've been able to make about it was that my mom thought brothers and sisters shouldn't argue, so she spanked us when we argued. Kids argue, brothers and sisters argue and fight. If you let them alone, usually they can figure out a way to work it out. So I knew well, I got, it was 25 years before I had someone tell me, yes, you were abused, and I saw it. It was a woman, it was a woman who had taken care of me until I was 3 years old. And when we admitted my mom to the nursing home, I saw her in the hallway. The first time I went back to visit, I saw this lady in the hallway, and she looked so familiar to me, but I didn't know who she was, which is really strange when you grow up in a town of my size, 2,000 people. Most people know most everybody. And I had worked in my dad's family practice clinic office since I was 14. And so the summers, and so I saw everybody. And this lady looked so familiar to me, and I didn't know who she was. And so I got up and I walked out into the hallway. She was creeping by on a walker very slowly. And I said, "Ma'am, I think I know you, but you look so familiar to me. I don't know who you are though." And she said, "Well, she said, you're Jane, Dr. Lee's daughter." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Honey, I took care of you when you were a baby." And that I just immediately started crying. I was like, could that be true, that I can remember somebody back to then, that early in my life? So I started sending her flowers for her birthday. I started visiting her. And about 5, 6 years ago, I asked her if she knew when the abuse started. I told her I knew when it ended. It ended when I was 12. And she said that, and let me just read this. She said, "Well, Jane, one day when you were 3 years old, baby, I was there and walked up on your mom, holding you down on the floor and beating you with a gold house shoe. Jesse asked my mom, 'What are you going to do? Are you going to kill her?' Mom stopped, looked up at Jesse, and said, 'I'm sorry.' Jesse said something like, 'Saying you're sorry is not enough.' At that point, I went to Jesse and got up onto her lap. That was when I was 3 years old. So I know when it began. I knew my mom had been abused. She had to have been. I'd known that for a long time. But I asked her best friend, I asked family members, does anybody know of mom being abused? And the answer was always no. And finally, her best friend said one day, well, maybe her mother was a harsh disciplinarian. One of my cousins, the night before my mom's funeral, when we were at the visitation, I asked her, I had found out my mom was married before my dad. That I didn't know about, except that I read her report when she got tested for Alzheimer's. And I didn't have the courage to ask her about that either. I just always kept this family secrets alive. And what I found out the night before her funeral was that when she was married to the first husband, he almost beat her to death and she left him. So, and then I had left my husband because he was emotionally cruel to me. I mean, just horrible. And so me and my mom, that's the way the story goes. And there's a Canadian physician named Gabor Mate, whose thinking now is coming to the fore. And what Gabor says is that I'm going to read this. Okay. Gabor says this: infants are totally in touch with their gut feelings. And we're born who we are. I believe we're pure love, we're pure compassion. But we're dependent on attachment figures to take care of us when we're young. The extent to which we have to abandon ourselves, our true selves, our true core of love and compassion in the service of maintaining the attachment leads to mental and medical disorders. We become alienated from nature, other people, ourselves. We choose uncreative work that doesn't fit with who we are. We lose awareness of our gut feelings. We have no sense of reality or the truth. And what we have to do is get back to our true nature and pursue the wonder that exists in the world. So I want to just we've got 7 minutes. Tell me your thoughts. Ask me questions. I welcome any questions y'all have. And
hi, Jane. Thank you so much for sharing this. First of all, I think it's really important, and I can imagine it's difficult, and hopefully it's also empowering in some way. I've had a little contact with some bipolar people just because of medical school. You have that opportunity. And this is, I guess you'll figure out the question in this, but I think for people that have not had mental illness, especially with manics, where the grandiose or the paranoid ideas, so many of us carry some of those ideas anyway. The news feeds the paranoia. We all have big dreams. And I think one of the things that makes it difficult for people, quote, afraid of people who are in that manic phase is when you are first talking to somebody like that, you are becoming part of that because you carry some of these things. And how do you bridge the fact that, and then you kind of suddenly realize, oh, wait, that they're in a different reality. So you're trying to connect with this person because they're a person. And
Mhm.
yet to maintain your own sense of reality, there's a moment where you want to say, oh, me, not them, different. I'm not them. So, in a way, it's a very self-protectioning, it's a way to protect yourself to particularly in that situation, not identify. And how would you address that? And yet you want to have compassion and understand.
There's a lot in that question.
No, I'm sorry.
And
Maybe it's just food for thought.
it's food for thought. I can get with you and talk to you about that at length. Yeah.
I've made a bunch of notes and already planned to invite you for a lunch because I think it'd be very interesting to get to.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. I think with the deal is that the manic episodes are the ones that people remember and define as bipolar disorder. And the manic episodes really, I mean, if you have bipolar for, from when you're 20 years old until you die, you usually have 9 episodes of mania, and they last, with treatment about 3 weeks. If you don't get treatment, they last about 3 months. They're easy to control. You give an antipsychotic and a mood stabilizer, and the person gets back to not being manic and just being themselves. It's the depression that's hell. It's the depression that's so hard to manage. But it's those manic episodes, and it's like, I tell that, I guess, I asked myself last night, why have I focused on telling those things? And I'm like, well, Jane, and that's interesting and it's entertaining. But it is, if you meet somebody in that state, it is very confusing because you can identify, you're trying to follow their conversation, and you're trying to go where they're going, and they're connecting things, and you've always tried to connect things. So I see totally, Anne, what you're saying. It does play up the importance of getting treatment as fast as possible when you're manic. Who else? Sally?
So I see your love and compassion, but I'm wondering, do you feel that you're back to yourself, or how are you feeling now?
Right now, since
Mhm.
2018, am I back to myself?
Well,
Oh, you mean like in the last 5 weeks, am I back to myself?
whatever fits,
Yeah.
moment, how
Well,
you,
I'm usually euthymic, which is a good middle ground, normal mood. Euthymic, not too sad, not too high. Euthymic. I'm euthymic. With changing the medicine, I've been aware that I'm not sleeping as well, and we have to. I need to take the more of the old one so that I sleep. But my mood is much better than my usual kind of low grade negativity. Everybody in my discussion group, well, in my small deacons groups that I've been in through the year, I think, see my tendency to think of things negatively. And I think that comes from the fear that's still there of being victimized. And I'm just more prone to be Debbie Downer.
I understand.
Yeah. I feel good. And I know when I'm getting sick and I don't want to be sick. I mean, it's kind of like Alzheimer's, and Bill knows this. Bill Hamilton knows this. At first, you realize that you're getting demented, and then there comes a place where you cross a line and you don't know. And that's the way the manic episodes are. You realize something's going on, but then you cross the line and you're psychotic, you're delusional, and you don't know, and you need to be taken care of, and you need to get the right medicine as soon as possible. Thanks for asking, Sally. I hope I am okay.
You are.
I may be a little scattered right now, but with the, the stress of talking and trying to do it more briefly. Yeah.
You're doing great.
Thank you. Well, Bill, it's 10 till 11. It's 10 till 10. What do you think? What should we do?
Well, I guess we can stop if somebody has a quick question. Tim?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, and it's nowhere near as compelling as Jane Ann's personal story, but the PBS series, The Mysteries of Mental Illness, which you can Google and find if you remember Mysteries of Mental Illness. But I will say some of those episodes are really tough because they're historical. It's not all historical. The history is horrific of what science has tried to do and the screwed upness of it. So if you want to know where the prejudice comes from, good God. One thing is particularly vivid of me, must date back to like the 40s. Everything was blamed on mothers. And I'm not saying mothers, like you just told us a story, there aren't actual problems, but that's not what we're talking about. Every little variation of mental illness was due to something the mother did wrong, which is not what Jane Ann was just telling us. But anyway, I don't know whether to recommend it or not. I think it's quality stuff, and it's not all historical. There's some very compelling people that get introduced. Anyway, I thought I would mention that if you hadn't seen it.
We can put that's the kind of thing we can put in the Voyager, our adult education newsletter. We will have something coming out fairly soon because one of the things, first of all, we got very poor response to our adult education survey. So if you haven't taken that, it'd be good for you to appreciate doing that. It did help us, but one of the things we're going to do is next week, I'll tell you what we're going to do next week, and perhaps certainly another time, and maybe the following week, I found an excellent Yale video of a class in Introduction to the Old Testament, and it's really quite solid in talking about what scholarship of the Old Testament is, and how the Old Testament came, or the Hebrew Bible came to be formed, and what are the different attitudes toward that. And I listened to 4 of the classes yesterday, and 2 of them particularly stood out as appropriate for our classes. So we'll do one of those next week, and we're going to have a meeting between this class and church. We're going to have either in-person or Zoom meeting of the Adult Education Committee. So we'll talk about some of those others. Anyway, I'm very pleased about this, and I think the class will enjoy it. But thank you again.
I just want to say one more thing. Gabor Mate, there was the physician I'm talking about. There's been a documentary made about him, and when I did one of these times, like 2 weeks ago, I was a little hypomanic, and I was just like sending emails out to everyone that I could think of to let them know, watch this documentary. It's so good. You're going to learn so much about yourself. You're going to learn so much about mental illness. And I got a little hypomanic because I got too excited about it. But it's available for screening. It's available to watch. All you have to do is go to wisdomoftrauma.com. It's going to be shown you can watch it for free, July 28th to August 1st, I believe, wisdomoftrauma.com. And then I'm hoping to have a screening of it somewhere in town, maybe at the church, It's 40 minutes, no, it's an hour and a half long. Okay.
Well, send that link to me so we can put that in the newsletter.
Oh, okay, I will, Bill, you bet.
All right.
Hey, well, thank you.
Hey, thank you.